Hello. I may look familiar to some because I'm identical to my mom, who, Abbi Tenaglia, who ran the preschool here for many years. So if you're trying to figure that out, we'll just get that out of the way right now. I'm not her, I wish I was her. So I run, my name is Abby, and I run an anti-trafficking organization called Transforming Hope in Durham. And our mission is to end human trafficking through education, prevention, and restoration. And so I was asked here today because if we're talking about sexual assault of any kind, especially childhood sexual assault, we have to talk about human trafficking. I guess I'll explain where I'm coming from. When I first heard about human trafficking in 2010, was a speaker who worked in Europe. And so that was my assumption, that human trafficking happens in other countries. There was not even a thought that crossed my mind that human trafficking could happen here in the US, or what that would look like, or anything like that. It was just, it's happening over there. So let me pack up my daughter and figure out how we're gonna go over there and fight this thing, because it's horrible and it needs to end. But as I did my research and I looked into actually moving to Europe and fighting this thing, I realized that human trafficking actually is prevalent in America. Not only does America provide the highest demand, both in America and elsewhere through sex tourism, but we've got an estimated 100,000 to 300,000 children at risk of being trafficked every single day right here in America. North Carolina consistently has ranked in the FBI's top 10 list of states most likely to have trafficking for at least the last 7 years that Transforming Hope has been around. The National Human Trafficking Hotline, run by Polaris Project, they received 27,000 calls in America in 2016 to help victims of human trafficking in America. The average age of entry into sex trafficking for a girl is 12 to 14 years old, and for a boy is 11 to 13. We've heard over and over and over by ex-traffickers, ex-buyers, that the younger the boy is, the more valuable he is to buyers. Going through my statistics here. 75% of predators who have been convicted of child abuse or sex trafficking have also reported being victims themselves. 1 in 5 homeless children are picked up and trafficked within 48 hours. In America, there's 1.6 million youth between the ages of 15 to 24 that are homeless. In North Carolina, there are 2,542 homeless people. And in Durham, according to Durham Public Schools, there were 846 homeless youth last school year. So 1 in 5 of them are picked up and trafficked within 48 hours in our county. As many as 40% of children who are sexually abused are abused by an older or more powerful child. We've heard hundreds of stories at this point where it was an older child who recruited and or trafficked a younger child. So they are participating in that way. And then 84% of sexual victimization of children under 12 occurs in a residence. So when we talk about human trafficking, even if people understand that it happens in America, we think, well, it's got to be that woman walking the streets or in the strip club, or what we think of may typically be prostitution or stripping. But unfortunately, there are homes all over America that are being used as brothels, that are being used as places where children in America are lured into this life and brought to and sold over and over and over every single day. Reports in Wake County from victims or from survivors who have been helped say that they are servicing anywhere from 30 to 50 clients a day. So this is, it's horrific, but it's happening here. It's when we work with children, we see human trafficking or sex trafficking on this spectrum of, it's a whole list of things that children are vulnerable to, and sex trafficking is on that spectrum. Unfortunately, that's not being recognized very often. So it's our job, through the education piece of our mission, to talk about it, to be the one to say, yeah, it's happening, we gotta pay attention to this. And it's happening, it's not just happening in the places where we think, oh yeah, that makes sense because it's a lower income neighborhood, or because the kids dropped out of school, or because they're homeless, or because they're vulnerable for all these other things. It's happening in our churches. It's happening in our schools and in our homes. I grew up in that, similar to Monica, I grew up in that two-parent home. Many of you know my parents. You know that I grew up in a good neighborhood, in a good church, in a good environment. Yet at 17 years old, I decided I was going to go my own way. And I was lured away from that good home and that environment via an online connection to a predator's home, 700 miles away. I was manipulated into ultimately standing in front of a video camera nude, as this man took pictures and video of me undressing, trying on different outfits, and he essentially had his way with me over the course of a weekend. And I didn't tell anyone about it for 12 years. I walked away from that environment convinced that it was my fault, shouldn't have been dumb enough to answer that online ad, shouldn't have been stupid enough to fall for his tactics. And if I tell anyone, that's what they're going to tell me. They're going to shrug their shoulders. Oh, well, you shouldn't have been that stupid, and walk away. So I think that initial event, I put it aside. Like others have said, I put it aside. It's time to move on. Put on your big girl pants and let's move on with life. But what I didn't realize over the course of those 10 to 12 years is that man stole something from me that I can't ever get back, and it determined my life for the next decade. I was filled with so much anger and shame and feelings of betrayal, from like self-betrayal and betrayal from others. Addiction, abuse. I was homeless at one point, and just disdain for myself and others. I was miserable and really ready to give up. In the 7 years that Transforming Hope has been around, I've heard story after story just like mine. Let me go back a second. What this man did is considered sexual exploitation. If he has taken that video and distributed it, that is the definition of human trafficking. I don't know if that happened. I do know that it was a setup. I know that there was a whole process over months that I knew nothing about until later. So that's what we're seeing with kids in America. The stories I'm hearing over and over that are just like mine is this months and months of work and planning and setup. And these kids are being lured in because we need a place to stay. We want We want a relationship. We want someone to pay attention to us. We're looking for the newest shoes or the newest whatever the trend is. Mom and Dad just gave me my first smartphone, and now I can connect with thousands of people in just a minute on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. And they're falling over and over and over, falling for these traps of people who want to use them for profit. Many victims or survivors of human trafficking have significant vulnerabilities, such as living in lower income communities or being homeless, living with a single parent or a parent with addiction, experiencing violence at home, but also experiencing that early childhood sexual abuse. And we know that the more exposure a child has to sexual abuse of any kind, the more exposed they are to something like human trafficking. Many times we've heard pimps or traffickers use this tactic or this way of manipulating kids to say, well, you've already been doing it, why not get paid for it? So they take something so ugly and evil in this child's life and twist it around so that they can make a profit off of it. Exposure to sexual abuse, as we've seen today, isn't confined to the neighborhoods that we drive past quickly so we don't get caught in the middle of some gang activity or so our kids don't witness a drug deal on the street corner. I know you know the communities I'm talking about. I'm actually going to do an egg hunt at one of those communities later today. That's why I'm dressed a little more casual. So I get to run around and dance with about 200 kids later today in one of those communities. Human trafficking is not just an international issue. It's happening to our kids in our cities, our schools, our churches, and our homes. Another big thing that as we've done this work, we've done a whole lot of trial and error in 7 years, and we've figured out not just what we think is best for the community, but what the community actually needs in terms of understanding human trafficking, and then preventing human trafficking has become a big thing for us. We're tired of just pulling people out of the river. We want to go upstream and figure out why they're falling in the first place and keep them from doing that. So with prevention, one thing we've really been able to do this year is that working with the kids in these communities, but also talking to parents and children about not just human trafficking, but things like consent and healthy boundaries, helping kids determine who their safe people are, and helping parents understand that it's not solely about teaching our kids stranger danger, because like we've seen, that's not the reality of what's happening. The predators are people we know, people that we've built relationships with, people that have not truly been vetted as safe people. One thing we've really been able to do this year is talk more with parents. We've kind of backdoored the idea of human trafficking because I am a parent, I have an 11-year-old daughter, and I understand that that's probably the scariest thing to think about happening to our kids. But I will talk about when I hand over this smartphone to my child, how do I prepare her for that kind of power and that kind of access? When I put a computer in the house, how do I train my child to know what to look for, what to close down, how to deal with the cyber world? So we talk to parents a lot about internet safety, and in those conversations we can talk about the other things like consent and boundaries, and some of the things that as survivors we wish others had talked to us about or to our parents about, had prepared them for. I'm losing my place. We do that, I do that, talking to parents, because 5 years ago, the first person I told my story to was my counselor, and it wasn't even intentional. It was, I think I was even more than 3 sessions in. I don't remember how far I was into counseling, but I was going because we had opened a safe home with Transforming Hope, and I told my staff, we all need to go to counseling because this is going to be hard work. And so I had to lead by example, right? So I'm sitting on the couch because I have to, sitting on her couch because I have to, and there something else we were talking about triggered that memory, and it's like my brain just stopped disassociating in that moment, and it all came out. And it was horrible. I was miserable. The next few sessions were painful to talk about, because it's like all the dots in my life started connecting. But I kept going. Took me 4 years to get through everything. I started sharing, as I shared with my counselor, I saw how it was a little easier to then go to my parents and share a little bit with them. And some of the mentors and the safe people in my life, I shared a little bit with them. And nobody responded in the way that I had told myself for 12 years they were going to respond. So then I kept sharing, and little by little I realized this is what I'm supposed to do. God redeemed my story so that he could save others through it, so he could redeem others through it. The very first time I shared my story in front of an audience, I wanted to throw up, and I probably looked like that too, because the host asked me, do you need a minute to pray real quick? I said, yes, I do. And I had my Bible with me, and God, in that moment, God showed me Exodus 4:12. It's in Moses' story where he's giving God the laundry list of excuses as to why he can't go back and talk to Pharaoh. And God, I think, what I picture is God's like, all right, man, like, stop. That's enough. And God says in Exodus 12, now go. I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. I wasn't going to cry. But he said that, and I have never questioned or feared sharing my story since then, because I have seen firsthand, as I'm sharing, other people are being set free. So I have to keep sharing, because I'm allowing God to set adults free, and I'm preventing children from falling into the same thing. So that's why we got into this, teaching children as well, teaching parents to protect their children. Someone once told me the devil thrives in secrecy. I think far too often, especially in communities like where I grew up, there's this resistance to talk to our kids about things like sex, because then they're going to want to do it. And I think actually the opposite is true. I think if we don't talk about it, it becomes this big secret taboo. Well, why not? Why shouldn't I do it? As I've seen with my daughter, as we talk about it, it's no longer a secret. It's in the light. Satan can't hold anything against her now, because Mom's already told me everything. She just this week, she's supposed to wear glasses all the time. She doesn't, and I fuss at her about it almost every day. And earlier this week, she got in the car. I said, "Where are your glasses? You're supposed to be wearing them 24/7." And she said, "I'm never wearing my glasses again if I have to see what I saw today." And I said, "Well, what happened?" She said, "We had the sex talk and they showed pictures." Okay, well, I understand. I said, did they say anything new to you? She said, "No, you already told me everything. We don't have to talk about it again." So good. Okay, well, job done. Good for me. That wasn't true with me growing up. We didn't have those conversations. There were topics that I thought were off limits. There were issues that I didn't feel like I could talk to my parents about, and I've heard that story over and over and over from others as well. So my encouragement to parents is that even though it feels scary and maybe they're not ready for this, there are ways to talk to our kids. We have to know that talking to our kids empowers them. It doesn't hurt them, it empowers them. It keeps them safe, and you help me do my job by preventing human trafficking. And it builds a safe place within your home, so that if and when things do happen, my daughter knows exactly who to go to, because there's no topic off limits, and there's no judgment when something does happen. I think that's the best way that we can prevent sexual abuse and sex trafficking. I think that's it. I wanted to share quickly too that because we've gotten into talking to parents, we don't want to just dump a bunch of information on you and then not help you in some way. So on our website, we've created an entire page of free resources for parents with different websites and links and tools. We have books. These two books we don't sell right now, but we have them available for parents to look at, so that like as a resource to get at some point. We do sell, one of the books we sell is Parenting in a Digital World, and it was written by law enforcement, and it's like a step-by-step how-to on protecting your kids from very young to the time they leave the house, protecting them and preparing them for the digital world. And then the other one we have to sell is called Renting Lacey. It was written by the founder of Shared Hope International. This one is more probably just for parents to learn a little bit more of what human trafficking looks like in the US. It's, specific stories of survivors, from very horrific to very subtle, to just understand the issue a little better.